We stand against totalitarianism, particularly imperialist expansionist totalitarianism. We are for democracy and human rights, and we are for a worldwide prosperity that only free economies can give, and the pursuit of human happiness that only political freedom allows.
Welcome to the Andrea Shaffer Show. Today we are highlighting Adrien Calamel. He is a Middle Eastern expert, and we're going to be speaking specifically on Iran and the Trump administration policy towards Iran, why it is important to America's national interest. There's a lot of disinformation out there today in the media and on like X social media that people don't quite understand the importance of being able to take down the regime within Iran. So today we're going to go over the current situation right now in Iran. And Adrian is going to go through some speculation or describe anticipation of what to expect next through the Trump administration. And then Adrian's going to explain why it's important for America to take down the regime in Iran based on their influence in Latin America and elsewhere. I'm really honored to have you here today, Adrian. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to save my voice. So if you could just give a little bit of a brief, as long as you want, actually, bio on what your background is and why you have authority to speak about the Middle Eastern foreign policy and Iran in specific.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Andrea. And as far as what I do, and this is what I've been watching for a long time, it's been Lebanon, Iran. Those are the two countries that I've been watching specifically, not just, and I'll refer to as the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that's been my life over the last bunch of years. And it's also looking at not just those two countries, but seeing who they're networked with, who they're working with. So if you look at the Islamic Republic, I always say that, them along with Moscow and Beijing, if you rank them in weakness to strength, are the greatest adversaries presented to the Western order right now. And the Islamic Republic I've never seen this regime as weak as it currently is. So, you mentioned on Truth Social, on X, Trump's statements. I think a lot of people read too much into what he's saying. People need to look at his track record with the Islamic Republic and how to deal with them. And it's been really consistent if you look at it from 2016 to 2018. He tried to work with them and tried to negotiate to some type of degree, realized that was impossible. There's no way to negotiate with this regime because they do not negotiate in good faith. So then he puts in the maximum pressure campaign 2018 to 2020, which drains the Islamic Republic. So that's the economic pressure that he put on them. Now, the regime did get a lifeline, but then all of a sudden now you have this, where we are now, where you have a Hezbollah that's been severely diminished, a Hamas that is nowhere where its capacity once was. You have Assad gone from Syria, so they can't activate proxies there. What they have been able to do is activate proxies that are left in Iraq. So what people are saying is, why didn't Trump back up the people? Well, he said that we need to, people of Iran, take back your institutions. We're going to be there for you. We've got your back. What he's saying right there in that message, I think people kind of misread that, is he wants the Iranian people to take back their institutions, take back their government. And what the Iranian people have always wanted is to take back their government by themselves. They need outside help. They recognize that they may need some outside help, but the regime has put so many problems on itself that it's a house of cards that's imploding, and that's what it's absolutely doing. So, it's with these protests, estimates about 20,000 killed. I mean, this dwarfs Tiananmen Square. This dwarfs any type of death counts that they put in Gaza in that type of time.
So what do you think the death count is currently in this most recent uprising?
It's 20,000 or more. And we haven't even gone into the people that are being held and being illegally detained. retained. And there's also a belief that the Iranians have given up. They have not. I've seen images of a besiege. And for the viewers who don't understand what the besiege is, that's the IRGC's shock troops. So they're the ones that ride in on two motorcycles. Two guys on a motorcycle, one driving, the other one with a baton or a gun, and they are the riot police. So I saw a besiege headquarters in Shiraz, I believe it was, up in flames. So the people are still protesting. And Trump has not been definitive about what he's doing. I think people were expecting him to hit when people were out in the streets protesting against this government, when it seemed like it was at the maximum peak of what any type of protest could. I'll just put in the argument here and saying, well, what if he did strike? You have all these people on the streets. The targets absolutely would be IRGC bases. They would be besieged bases. If he hit those and you have people marching on them, what type of collateral damage does that leave? So, and we also have to look at assets in the region. Did we have the assets in the region with a quickly developing story the way it was at the same time when Venezuela was taking place? And we have a lot of naval assets there as well. So I think it's just, everybody needs to pause on this. Trump, I believe, recognizes that sometime within his term, he's going to have to bomb the Iranian nuclear program again if he does not get rid of this regime. Because
let me ask you a question. I'm sorry for interrupting. When you said that Iran needs some level of assistance from our administration, the Trump administration, what would that look like in your opinion?
Well, they've done so much on the outside support where it's putting the regime in an economic vice. So that's one part. It's a whole bunch of things. And you saw him announcing new sanctions, and there's all those things that he can do. There's also ease of communication, getting communication to the people and making more accessible for individuals who are there. But as far as kinetic action goes, it's given the people a little bit of space. So the besieged IRGC, they did bring in militias from Iraq, as well as probably Hezbollah members. I got to wait for confirmation on that, but definitely Iraqi, the al-Shabi militia, brought them in, and they mowed down the people. So what Trump needs to do, in my estimation, is one, hit those headquarters, hit the besiege, hit the IRGC bases. If I know where a lot of these individuals or these bases are, I would imagine the DOD knows where they are. And that will send a strong message. And that could also encourage defections and defections within the Artesh. The Artesh is the national army. The IRGC is a terrorist organization. The Artesh has been, I would say, cannibalized by the IRGC. They've taken all their weapons, all their, the Artesh.
So for the audience that doesn't know what the Artesh is, can you give it a little bit more description?
Yeah, it's basically what any conventional army would be. It's their national army. They're the ones that often get pushed on the borders in this current, in the regime's order of battle, the way they do things. The Artesh are the ones that usually get put in dangerous situations, such as on the Afghan border when there's a dispute going there.
Okay.
Sometimes they have, most of their equipment has been co-opted. All the guns, all the ammunition, the salaries, everything goes to the IRGC. The Artesh is kind of a sister organ, and they're not even a sister. They're not even considered zealots in this situation. And I would say they were the natural individuals that would rise up against the IRGC apparatus and the besiege. And I think that's one thing that needs to happen. And I've seen people a little upset that there haven't been more defections from the Artesh.
Okay, great. I think now is the time to, in your estimate, you said that you think that Donald Trump should bomb the nuclear facilities again. Aside from that, what do you see as far as a timeline of events to unfold in your best estimate?
Well, The nuclear timeline, as far as them getting back to some type of capabilities, is probably about 2 years from the time when they stopped, from time of action, when they called the end of the ceasefire. So, but as far as toppling this regime, again, you got to seize the momentum when it's there. And now's the time. I would say within the next 2 weeks would be my hope that something would be done. Because you still have a restive population, but they're waiting. That you have to understand that these people, all they're being fed is disinformation. That the United States isn't going to help, and they're trying to dampen their spirits. So we got to make sure that we do the job and we do it correctly. No half measures on this one.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to add at this point as far as the current situation?
No, all I could say is that, when the videos still start to come out, and we still haven't really seen many videos, there's still an internet blackout, shutdown. People are going to be horrified. And I think that's what's going to turn, Trump's going to use that, I would say, as the impetus to carry out this attack. And he should be. This was the mass slaughter of 20,000 people, upwards north of 20,000, I would say.
How many people are you imprisoned that you mentioned earlier?
Oh, there's got to be thousands. And you got to imagine that there's a bunch left over from the 12-day war, because after that ended, they were going around and roping up and wrapping up people and throwing them into prison. Wow. So there's thousands in prisons. Evin obviously is one of the political prisons in Tehran, and one of the most important, where they hold high value individuals, but they're scattered throughout the country. And getting those political prisoners, it's important to get them out as well, because those are the people that can rebuild this society in a lot of cases.
Right. Why don't we move into why it is important? Well, let's go back to the history of the Iranian regime and how they have quite a wide breadth and depth in regards to infiltrating other countries, including Latin America, and right in our backyard. So I'm going to put up a image in regards to the routes from Iran to Latin America. And if we can start there, and you just describe the history of it, the length of it, and why it is of detriment to our national security. Whoops. Well, it didn't work right. I apologize.
That's all right.
Okay. So just go ahead. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Well, that's the thing. There's flights going to just about every Latin America country from the Islamic Republic. And what this has been is it's been a long-term infiltration, entryism, whatever you want to call it, penetration of Latin America. If I looked at it, there were two major hubs where this was done. One was in the tri-border area, in the southern cone. That's Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil, in that border area. But the one place that is in the northern cone that has been the I would say the springboard for the Islamic Republic, the springboard for Hezbollah, has been highly lucrative for both the regime and the terror organization, which is its premier proxy. It is Venezuela. And this project, you look at the Islamic Revolution, happened about 1979. It happened in 1979. You see this entryism, this infiltration really starting to happen in 83 in Argentina, for example. And it starts with first cultural. It starts at the cultural level. It's pushing the Islamic Republic's ideals, beliefs, a very, what you call, soft pressure type of campaign. Then it moves on to diplomatic missions. All right. Prior to 2004, I believe it was the Islamic Republic only had 6 embassies in all of Latin America. now that number is growing. I forget what the number is at right now, but by 2009, the number was up to 11, so it grew. And this was largely because of these diplomatic missions. And then the next level is the economic infiltration, so where they directly embed themselves in the economy. So Venezuela, Colombia, especially Venezuela, before the Chavez regime took over, they did have a lot of immigration coming in from Latin America, specifically from Lebanon, during the Lebanese Civil War. Latin America, Venezuela was a prosperous nation, oil reserves, world's largest oil reserves, and it did well. It made sense for people, and it was largely Maronite Christians. You would have some other groups, but it was largely Maronite Christians and some other groups that came across. And what happened was Hezbollah and these other terrorist organizations, IRGC, they kind of piggybacked on these migrations, on these mass migrations that moved into these areas. And then what they did was they just slowly started to embed this illicit economy into the Venezuelan Colombian economy. It was just kind of this this cross-border economy that happened between Venezuela and Colombia, went back and forth. And in fact, one of the clans operated, you look at 3 clans in Venezuela, 3 clans in Venezuela that are Hezbollah clans that run the operations there. And you also see members and people who are connected with them, and it's all familial connections that have actually entered into the government as well.
So how embedded are they in Cuba? I just put up another media image while you were talking, if you can see that. How embedded, and we're getting back to why it is of major national interest, since this is all in our backyard.
Yeah.
How embedded are they in Cuba? I have 3 of the biggest leaders here. Cuba, and then Maduro, which is here on our soil now. And then we have the other individual here. I believe it's of Colombia. Is that correct? No, Colombia.
Bolivia.
That's Bolivia. Yeah.
So with Cuba, it's, as soon as the Soviet Union fell conveniently, they needed money. Cuba can't function without getting illegal oil or something. They have absolutely no economy to speak with. And so Venezuela quickly became that lifeline in 1992. Chavez, he believed in a socialist Bolivarian, he called it, revolution throughout Latin America. And one thing that he did was he propped up Cuba. And it's really quite obvious when you saw Fidel Castro going through health issues. He was in Venezuela, or vice versa. Chavez was visiting him. But the Venezuelan government has taken the place of the Soviet Union in this case in propping up Cuba. Now, that also means that it's going to let other people run wild there as well. The Russians, especially the Chinese, they have reworked one of the old Russian spy bases there. So Venezuela floated it economically.
Well, they have to, the Venezuelans came into a China agreement. They actually have embedded 2 satellites so they can spy on America. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Cuba's right on, and that's the one thing. You look at Venezuela on this map as people are looking at it, people think it's, way far away. It's not far away.
No.
Now, they haven't been able to develop a navy. That hasn't really been their focus. They have a brown water navy. It's always been on internal suppression. So that's not the issue. The issue is that you have drones, being flown in there. What happens when they start flying in drones, ballistic missiles? What's being shipped in on these? It was a launching pad. What happens when this goes over to Cuba? They're in bed with each other. So, this
don't they do military exercises?
Military exercises, intelligence cooperation, you name it, they do it. Bolivia is also, you have them rightly pointed out, they've been a long time problem as well, because that's not him, I don't believe, but Evo Morales, who was the former leader, he was quickly connected to the Chavez regime. And so what's interesting is you saw a bunch of these Latin American countries in the north start to fall into the Chavez Venezuelan orbit. And the way they did that was basically to create chaos in these countries. So they, with FARC, which was the narco terrorists operating in Colombia, they financed the FARC for years to destabilize that government. And now they look at the Colombian government, and they're really allied with this current leader, with the Maduro regime. But I mean, that was one of the last ones to fall, it seems. They flip-flop back and forth, but the influence that this regime has had has been really horrific, not just for the Venezuelan people, because you see what they've been reduced to, living in poverty, people locked up in jails and whatnot, no real economy to speak of, unless you're involved in the narcotics game or connected to the regime or take a job inside the regime. And so Venezuela developed all these institutions. You think about that. It's 1992 to 2025. They were able to develop all these institutions over a long period of time. Now, these other countries, they weren't, I mean, that's the silver lining there, is that they weren't able to develop the institutions to the extent that Venezuela was able to, nor do they have the oil wealth that Venezuela has, where it can fuel discord throughout an entire hemisphere. And that was Chavez's plan.
Exactly. And this has been going on, what, 2 decades or longer?
3 decades now, yeah.
3 decades or longer. So getting back to what you said earlier, Iran, Hezbollah, all the henchmen that infiltrated into Latin America, from Central America to Latin America, like I put on this chart here, it shows all the different areas that they have infiltrated. And it was their plan, I don't know what you would call it, soft power, to destabilize the region and bring the leaders from that region into their orbit and to do their bidding and their agenda. And then from there, we had this open border that was wide open.
Yeah.
We major influx of millions, tens of millions of people came into our country. And that's another way of destabilizing America. And
Yep.
that's what Maduro did. He emptied his prisons and sent everybody up to America. What is well, I'd like to hear your take on this.
Well, you're exactly right with, with the Islamic Republic. When the Islamic Republic looked at Latin America originally, America being the great Satan, it was the closest they could get. And it was a way to strike at the United States and or strike at Israeli targets in Latin America. And the most famous ones are the 1992 embassy bombing, the Israeli embassy bombing, and then the Amia bombing, which happened in 1994. That's what they were set there to do. But then eventually they realized that there was so much money to be made in the narco trade and in other illicit businesses, but especially in the narcotics game. So and that's the dangerous part for Americans trying to understand this, is that a lot of times we don't understand that when you talk about Hezbollah, we don't understand that they're equal parts terrorists as they are equal parts gangster. And then they also don't have a problem working with groups like Los Zetas in Mexico. That's their one cutout that they work with in Mexico, which the Maduro
Which is a
regime,
gang, which is a cartel gang, right?
Exactly, which is also one which the Maduro regime worked with funneling cocaine to Los Zetas. So you see a triangulation.
And what happens to the money?
The money gets spent on terrorism. It gets spent on terrorism or propping up the Lebanese state. The money all goes back to Lebanon. I mean, you will see and that's a large part of what Hezbollah has had to do. I mean, they have since since they really got torn apart by Israel, and their leadership their military capabilities all stripped away. One thing that they needed to do was rebuild, and the Islamic
Right.
Republic was obviously having to deal with. They're fighting a war against Israel. Not too many people realize that
Right.
this war on multiple fronts being fought by the Islamic Republic's proxies. And what Israel did was they knocked them down one by one by one, based on their threat matrix. The threat that they actually posed to Israel. And Hezbollah was obviously the greatest one. Hezbollah has always been the
So
greatest.
basically, Israel has been dismantling the regime and the infrastructure for America, and we didn't have to essentially put boots on the ground. I don't think people understand that either.
And that's the point. Great that you brought that up. This America First crowd, or whatever they call themselves, they're not America First. All
No,
right?
they're
That's the term.
isolationists.
They're isolationists. They believe that we can be protected by oceans. Well, you know what? That mindset brought us 9/11, and what brought me into this sphere of actually trying to educate people about thinking this way. So you look at what Israel has done. It took out from Imad Bunia, and this was back in 2013 he was taken, or 2008 that we got him. The Israelis got him. But you look at from Bunia, and then you look at what they were able to do with their leadership structure, what they did with their complete command structure. They completely erased it. People that we had $5 million bounties on, people that we had $7 million bounties on, people that, if I was the Israeli government, I'd be asking, can we collect on that bounty that you have out on this individual? But they are making America safe. And what people don't understand about Hezbollah, about the Islamic Republic, is that, and they don't connect it to 9/11. If you read through the 9/11 report, I'll point it out. You go to page 241, 242, read through that. It explicitly states the material support that they got from the Islamic Republic.
Exactly.
Okay? So Al-Qaeda was not the group that it was. It really became the strike force that was from 92 to 96 in the Sudan under training and leadership from the IRGC and Hezbollah. So you can see where the mainspring of evil and terrorism, this 21st century jihadism, where you have buildings being toppled, or planes being flown into buildings. Technology has made that possible now, and we need to deal with that ideology. And the only way to take out that ideology in some cases is to remove the source of it. And the Islamic Republic is one of those sources.
Okay, so let's get back to removing the source, the regime. In your expert opinion, how would you imagine that happening? Because there's a lot of people that are concerned that once the current regime falls, maybe a really bad regime comes back in. What is that process going to be to help secure a better regime so it doesn't just revert back to what it is today?
Yeah, I think, and that's a great question, Andrew. I think a lot of people like to draw they like to bring up the term balkanization, dismemberment, carving up of Iran, or bring up a Syria example where you have Jelani come in and you have a person who was former, Al-Qaeda, is Al-Qaeda, taking over a country. Iran is much different. Its history is much different. The people in the diaspora are much different, and the people inside Iran are much different. I think if you listen to the voices in the streets and you actually look at the slogans being chanted, I think there is a general consensus that the Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, is the best person for a transitional government. Not that he's going to lead it, but he wants to be one of a bunch of individuals that I think wants to push this to a constitutional monarchy. I think that would be the best approach for this country. You have groups in the diaspora, such as the MEK, the Mujahideen al-Khalq. They have no support inside Iran, and they have no support outside Iran. The only support that they have is with politicians in Brussels and DC. They've thrown money around to kind of amplify their voice. And any intelligence that was ever given to them was leaked to them by friendly intelligence agencies, meaning friendly to us or people that were not aligned with the Islamic Republic.
So let me ask you, I want to back up a little bit. Can you describe the people of Iran, what they're saying on the streets, and what are the demographics?
Well,
Because it's hard to tell. There's not a lot of accurate information out there, and you probably have a better assessment.
yeah, I mean, generally, when you look at the Iranian population, it's always going to be about 50%, around 50%, up to 55% is going to be Persian. And then you're going to have a bunch of other groups, a large Turkic minority, Baluchis, Kurds, a large Kurdish population as well. And so that's the composition. Now, as far as religious composition, I would say people have completely moved away from Islam. There's something called declension in society.
Yeah, I hear the mosques are empty.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like this happened with the Puritans in New England, to give you an example. You can't keep people under that strict system without people breaking out of that system and saying, this isn't really working for us, and moving away from the religion. And that's what you've had, is people have completely moved away from the religion. It's become secular, and that's really what it was before the Islamic Republic came in and hijacked it. It was, an operation between, Khomeini had maybe the mouthpiece, and he saw the power in the street and grabbed it. But he relied on the Marxists, the Tudeh party, the communists. Right. Okay, so then they hijacked it and put the strict Islamic law into place, this regime. And really the only time I can look back in Iranian history is to the 1500s and 1600s during the Safavids, and they used the same type of method where they tried to use this virulent form of Shiism to unite all the tribes in Iran. And it worked for a time, but it eventually broke apart. You can only unite people that way, with that vitriolic hatred, destroy Israel, death to the little Satan, death to the great Satan, everything's a conspiracy theory. It only has so much legs.
So you've done some work with some different foundations, NGOs, and published some interesting white papers, I guess you would call them. Would you like to just, promote yourself right now and give us some ideas of what you wrote about and who you work with in regards to the Middle East and Iran?
Sure. Yeah, I published in a couple of different areas. The one that I've read, there's a new group in France that kind of burst onto the scene when we published this white paper that was about, the main purpose of the paper was to show Iranian infiltration, the regime infiltration in France. And they specifically tapped on me to talk about regime spying, how they were able to spy on the 2015 nuclear negotiations. So I wrote that part. So it was a 85-page report that was put together, that was sent to the Ministry of the Interior, the French, two other bodies.
Right.
And it's still being covered. And it's brought up a lot of interesting issues that need to be commented on that nobody was willing to talk to. And thankfully, I live here, because many of my colleagues who are living in France who wrote this, they've been threatened. So our next piece is we're going to be doing something on the Muslim Brotherhood. Looking at the Muslim Brotherhood, because when we look at both sides of that jihadi or Islamist coin, the one side is the Khomeinists, and the other side are, I like to call, the Kutubists, named after Sayyid Qutb, who was the major master propagandist for the Muslim Brotherhood, was executed by Nasser. The Muslim Brotherhood is the part that, and you start to see this falling into Trump's orbit as well, saying, okay, now we're going to sanction the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Lebanon, and Jordan. I'm going to be writing this paper with these French journalists, politicians, scholars, and it should be published, I believe, around April timeframe. And the group is called France 2050. It's just looking at,
Send that to me. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Pardon me?
Okay. If you send that to me, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. So that I've worked on that. I've helped with supporting NGOs at on the Yemen. So I was speaking out on the Houthis back in 2019 in Geneva before.
So where is the Houthis right now? How
Houthis,
how dismantled are they?
Not enough. They're in a pretty good position, and there's been a lot of bickering between the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, and the Saudis. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been very unhelpful in this situation. The Saudis support the Muslim Brotherhood politicians in Yemen. Okay. And that's basically the Presidential Leadership Council, the group that had been there for years and years and years, but failed, and led to a failed state. You have a Southern Transitional Council. Everybody's labeling them as secessionists, which they're not. What they're doing is they created a protective zone in the south around Aden to make sure people aren't falling under Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Muslim Brotherhood rule to the east or Houthi rule to the north. So the Houthis are, they coordinate with Al-Qaeda, AQAP, which is one of their best franchises, and they're going to slowly try to degrade the STC. I hope the West, America, gives a little more attention to the STC and groups like that.
So let me ask you a question that a lot of people online, at least, I can't speak for the administration. I'm not internal, absolutely, but people are complaining that Donald Trump has not gone far enough as far as declaring the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, an FTO, specifically for countries like Qatar. What is your assessment, and what, in your opinion, what do you see going down the road based on what Trump has done currently and how effective that will be, and if he's going to expand that wider, especially since we got into economic agreements with Qatar, but they still are heavily infiltrated with Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, so that's that's the big sticking point right there. You mentioned it. Egypt and Jordan were low-hanging fruit. Okay,
right.
Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood's been banned since 2013, and Jordan just recently banned it. All right. Lebanon was also low-hanging fruit because really they should not exist there because they have a militant wing which fired on Israel multiple times during this war that took place. By definition, they are in violation of Lebanese law, the Taif Agreement, which was signed in 1989, that they cannot have weapons. So that's low-hanging fruit. When you get to Qatar, that's the big question. That's the Muslim Brotherhood nation. They're the ones that pumped this out through Al Jazeera. They're the ones that they are they've got the money and they've got the ability to push the soft power, and they've done that tremendously with the fact that they own movie studios in the United States like Miramax.
Sports teams too. They're really getting into our culture.
Yes,
and property.
Property. Like if you go to London, like good luck finding property in London that isn't owned by Qatar. Okay, so what they've done is they've used the greediness of Western politicians and or individuals, and we haven't put any rules into place to say, wait a second, is this a national security issue with them buying up all this property or buying up all our studios or whatever this is?
They're part ownership of a sports team in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So that's what they
and
always
that's pretty strategic in my mind, because you have all the players, not only elected officials, but you have all the think tanks.
Yep.
That people that live there, and then you have all the NGOs, and it just goes on and on and on. So that's just another way of influencing culture in
Yep.
Washington, D.C.
They did the same thing with Paris Saint-Germain, which is one of the
Yeah,
largest football clubs or soccer clubs in the world. Um, they bought them, and yeah, it's
they
called sports. It's
also
called
are
sports
part. They
watching.
also are. I think you probably know this, but they're also sponsoring. They're the main sponsor of some type of cultural festival that goes on yearly in New York City.
Yeah, yeah, they've pumped even before the elections. I forget how many, what it was $1 billion or more. I forget what the actual figure was, but they've got a lot of money and they pump it into the country. They buy it and they enter into business arrangements that should be under higher scrutiny. I think that like two of our special envoys in the Middle East have had significant business dealings with Qatar, and that's Tom Barak. He sold PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, to Qatar. Wyckoff sold his Park Avenue place when he was bankrupt to Qatar to the tune of $623 million. So Qatar's, they're kind of like, I look at them as Pakistan 3.0, except for they got like money. There's always been this belief that yeah, they're not good, but we need a cutout. We need somebody to talk out to the bad actors, to be a mediator. And it all started with like the Doha agreement with the Taliban. You started to see this shift when we started to realize that Pakistan could not be trusted. Somehow we put our fate into Qatar's hands as far as negotiating. Like our military base there should be removed, shuttered.
I want you to finish that. Go ahead.
Our military bases are absolutely no purpose right now. It was built for Afghanistan and the Iraq War. Okay. And that's what it was built for. It could be easily repositioned somewhere else. Now it's just used over our head. So when we do something that isn't happy, that doesn't work for the Islamic Republic, they threatened to bomb our base at Al Udeid Air Base. Okay. And quite frankly, they probably tell Qatar, hey, we're sending missiles now, get everybody out of there.
So what's the solution? The two questions now.
Yeah.
As far as the air base, the base in Qatar, and long range for the Trump administration as far as the Muslim Brotherhood, since like the home base is Qatar. I know I listened and I followed Seb Gorka for a very long time. I really respect the man, and he's leading up the counterterrorism advisory board, task force, whatever it's called. And he seems to be very set on taking down the Muslim Brotherhood. Is it a strategic, step-by-step, expanding it over time if certain players don't behave, like Qatar?
Well, that was, I kind of glossed over it. It was back to your original question, Andrea. It's kind of a layered approach, and that's what we're going to see. I'm very interested to see, what entities are going to be labeled next. How about domestic Muslim Brotherhood affiliate organizations? We have not had an investigation into a Muslim Brotherhood that was financing Hamas since the Holy Land Foundation back in 2007, 2008. Everything's been shut down. There's been nothing. And you can't tell me that the Muslim Brotherhood or groups affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States are not sending money to Hamas. It's absolutely
exactly. Well, we see what's happening in Minnesota, right?
Oh, geez, yeah.
So I mean, yeah, and that's a small country compared to Iran and all the other players, and
that's the thing.
the money with Qatar.
They're grifters, it's Qatar, they're grifters. And there's that term in sports where they use the term sports washing. It's whitewashing. They throw money to whitewash their records on human rights abuses. If you look at Qatar.
So President Trump is pragmatic and very tactical, I guess I would have to say, in his approach. And I imagine, you mentioned the Holy Land Foundation trial.
Yeah.
I would imagine, like we said earlier, and I think you're in agreement, that it's going to be a layered step-by-step approach. If it gets to the point of a Holy Land Foundation type trial and they're hitting those other countries, but those other countries are, air quotes, whatever, partnering with Qatar and
Yeah.
people that are within inside the Qatar government or minister government structure, I think that will expand the interest within the Trump administration to really put some pressures or red lines down
Yeah.
for the Qataris. Because, I mean, from the outside looking in, a lot of people are saying, are viewing, the financial agreements that we've had with Qatar as more of an appeasement measure where, maybe if we become partners, which I think we should, because if Qatar is spending money with us versus one of our adversaries, that's better, right?
Yeah.
But if they're still dipping in both sides of the coin when it comes to funding, supporting terrorism through the Muslim Brotherhood, we can't have that for very long. And if that comes out, that there are people that are connected to the Qatari government through an investigation on these other chapters in other countries, I think Trump would put his foot down and do the appropriate decision.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I've always said with the Muslim Brotherhood, it's going to be very tricky because it's this huge. There's this huge umbrella organization. There's been multiple iterations, but you see some of the most impactful changes to the Muslim Brotherhood came with Qatari guidance.
Right.
Right around the time of the second Intifada, and even the first Intifada, but second Intifada, I would say, you started to see that. But it's always going to, with figuring out who they are and who it's going to be following the money. It's going to
Right.
be like the Al Capone type thing. There's so many different ways that they can get money through different channels to the Muslim Brotherhood. But you look at some countries and they, like France, for example, there's a group called Humanitaire. All right. They were, the U.S. State Department labeled them as a foreign terrorist organization or one of the state designations. Okay. SDGT, one of these groups, they labeled them as Hamas's primary European fundraiser, this group. And they operated for a couple decades until the French government, about 6 months after October 7th, 2023. So moving into 2024, they seized 36 million euros from them, which was designated for Hamas. And it was a camp that was just 36 million euros that was based on response to supporting Gaza I'm talking after October 7th. So This was a fundraising money to get money to Hamas. And it's been quite scandalous because they found scooters in tunnels with this organization's logo on it, aid delivered to them with their logo on it. And what these organizations do, it's the big grift in a lot of these NGOs, is 80% goes to the terror organization Hamas, and they deal with the Gaza Ministry of Health, which we know who that's controlled by, and then 20% they say that it goes in the green projects for Gaza. But some countries are clamping down. I would like to see the United States follow up. It's interesting. Rubio, I think, he's the Holy Land Foundation was prosecuted in Florida. He's from Florida. I like to think that Rubio is the one that's leading the charge on this Muslim Brotherhood.
He's really matured as far as his leadership over the last 6 years or so.
Yeah.
I was a little bit concerned, upset that TPUSA coordinated JD Vance in their AmFest. My preference is Rubio. He seems to understand it. He gets it. And I think that Trump is following much of his advice.
I do too. And, back to our original question on Iran, I think that's who he's listening to. Trump listens to a lot of voices. He listens to a lot of people, analysis, opinions. Some are opinions, some's real analysis. But, he's going to make his mind with the best, the person who's the most informed, the one that makes the most sense. And for me, Rubio is the one really serious person that's juggling so many jobs at the time being right now. He's fantastic personally. If you look at, him keeping the isolationist pack at bay and making sure that, sound reasoning is coming into this, I think you only need to look at Rubio.
He's very strong. He's very strong. I've watched him over the years. I watch a lot of Senate hearings and whatnot just to, assess my elected leaders, whether they're in my state or not. And Rubio's just, he is really coming to his own. Really coming to his own.
He always got it. He always understood it. It was a matter of communication. I think maybe in the past, I don't know, but I've been following him for years, and he just gets it, and he's well informed. He's well informed.
So let's go back to the discussion that we had about half an hour ago, when we were talking about Latin America, Central America, and how Cuba is really entangled with all this Hezbollah, IRGC terrorist stuff. What is your opinion in regards to, are we going to go after Cuba next, or in this hemisphere?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question. And you know what, Andrea, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. It just depends on, how many Chinese assets are there at the time, how many Russian assets are in there at the time. That place has become a playground place for the Russians and the Chinese, especially the Chinese, to commit.
And training camps for our citizens.
Yep. So
the
Cuba
revolution on the other side.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. Well, we're winding up now. So is there anything else that you would like to discuss that we did not discuss today?
No, I don't think so. I would say just, everybody should just take a time, pause on what's going on with the Islamic Republic. Understand that it is in our best interest, number one, that regime falls. From a historical perspective, empires, dynasties, whatever you want to call them, they all fall. Tyrannies have a shorter shelf life. And the Islamic Republic is at 47 years. I do think we are going to see action. I think it's inevitable, but I think everybody just needs to understand that Trump has played this extremely well. He put the Islamic Republic on a 60-day clock with their nuclear program. Everybody thought, why are we negotiating with them? Everything's going to be a bad deal. Yeah, it is going to be a bad deal, and Trump knows that. It was to get things ready until he was completely ready. And then on day 61, bang, they were hit.
Right.
And then the question was,
I have faith in my president.
Exactly. And then the big question was, do you think Trump is going to, and I was doing interviews, the day before it happened, do you think the U.S. is going to hit Fordo and Natanz? I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
Trump's been very clear with the Islamic Republic. He understands that, one, taking Venezuela offline gives us energy security. It also gives it in the future, if things progress properly, it'll give us energy security. But it helps the Iranian people. It helps those people that are oppressed. It helps the Cuban people that are oppressed. People will say, well, Trump's starting wars here, starting wars there. Well, no, I would say he's not doing that. What happens is, weakness invites aggression. That's what starts wars. You need to have a strong forward posture. Trump had that going in, and he's been clear-eyed about the Islamic Republic dating back to his first term. So that's the message. And with Venezuela, keep your eyes on it. That'll be very it'll be very interesting because something needs to happen. You can't have those state institutions that are still dominated by Maduro's henchmen or henchwomen running them.
Right. Well, where can we find you on social media and other places before we close up tonight?
Yeah, I would say
Adrian?
probably the best place is my Twitter account. It's just at Adrien Calamel, no hyphen or anything. Very odd name, so I'm easy to find. I also have a website. It's just www.adriencalamel.com, and then my LinkedIn as well. So I'm
Okay.
more active on Twitter and stuff.
I'll put that in the show notes too, so people know where to find you.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
You're welcome. I hope to have you back soon, and I hope my voice is better. I got hit with the crud, some kind of flu bug or something. It's going on 2 weeks, and it's just really dragging,
Yeah.
really dragging. So I
Yeah.
apologize to my audience, and I apologize to you, Adrian, for having such a scratchy voice.
That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, Andrea. Thank you.
I really enjoyed it too. I mean, ever since I met you years ago now, you're a wonderful person. You're very knowledgeable, and you're welcome here anytime. If there's a critical matter that you want to discuss right away, just text me, give me a phone call, whatever. I really appreciate you coming on board today. And I want to thank our audience for watching the program. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We will be producing more programs in the near future. I have a major individual that has agreed to come on board that will be just awesome. I have many actually. And just stay tuned. Put on that notification bell, and you will be the first one to see the next episode that comes out. Thank you very much, Adrian. God bless America, and everybody have a great day. Thank you.
History shows that it is precisely when totalitarian regimes begin to decay from within, it is precisely when they feel the first real stirrings of domestic unrest,